Today, I'm going to talk about the economic concept, fallacy of composition. The reason I picked this concept is that we tend to think that what is logically correct for the individual is also correct for the society. However, what I would like to show in this presentation is that in economics, it is a false assumption. In other words, what is applicable in microeconomics does not necessarily translate to macroeconomics. This can be explained by the following three examples. To become familiar with the term fallacy of composition, I start with a general definition in example 1 and apply it to a familiar sport, baseball. A general definition is the following. The mistake of assuming what is true of an individual is true for the group as a whole. For example, Ichiro is a great Japanese baseball player who plays in the American Major League Baseball League. Therefore, all Japanese Major League Baseball players are great players like Ichiro. While it is easy to think like this, it is actually misleading. The Japanese baseball player Igawa, for example, failed in the major leagues. A second example of the fallacy of composition relates more specifically to economics. It is the paradox of thrift. From an individual's perspective, we tend to think that thrift is always good, and we feel more responsible when we save. Being thrifty is logically correct at the individual level. If one household saves money, the household savings rate increases. But when looking at a household savings increase, any macroeconomic effects can be ignored because the household impact is so small that it does not affect the economy as a whole. Therefore, the household. So then, what is the paradox? To answer this question, think about what would happen if everybody collectively saves money. A recessionary period theoretically illustrates a collective effort to collectively save money while also reducing spending. During a recession, people tend to reduce consumption. Therefore, there are lower spending levels in the macroeconomy. This decreases consumption demand, causing layoffs and results in a loss of consumer confidence. While households may try to increase savings due to the uncertainty that a recession brings, aggregate savings in the total economy decrease overall. This is the paradox. Okay, let's now think about a simplified, fun example of the paradox of thrift. I call this sushi economics. Ichiro lives in the Republic of Wasabi. He loves sushi and only eats sushi. He decides to reduce his sushi consumption because his batting average has recently plummeted, so his team cut his salary. He needs to reduce his sushi spending. The reduction of sushi consumption increases Ichiro's savings. But what if everybody in the Republic of Wasabi reduces the consumption of sushi, like Ichiro, their national hero? Will national savings increase? No. Sushi restaurants will not sell as much sushi, so they will have to lay off workers and reduce the orders for tuna, salmon, wasabi, rice, and so on, which will hurt their suppliers. All of the workers who lost their jobs will have to dip into their savings due to lower incomes. So, if everybody tries to increase savings by reducing sushi consumption, lower sushi spending in the Republic of Wasabi will result in a negative macroeconomic impact. Here is another example of the fallacy of composition in a real-world situation. If Vietnam follows export-led growth, manufacturing as many iPads as possible, it may not achieve growth if all neighboring developing countries, such as China and Myanmar, follow the same export-led growth policies. In other words, if several countries all produce the same export product, increased supply will lower the product's price, and foreign markets will quickly become saturated. As we go back to the paradox of thrift during a recessionary period, individuals cannot increase their consumption for the country's whole economy. Please think about who has the ability to spend money and who has the responsibility to manage the country's whole economy. The answer is the government. In fact, GDP not only consists of consumption and investment, but also government expenditures and net exports. So the government needs to spend to offset the lower consumption and investment levels, or promote private sectors to export more goods. So here are some possible solutions for mitigating GDP contraction as well as spurring domestic consumption levels. For fiscal policy, governments can A. Increase government expenditure, or B. Reduce taxes, which incentivizes households to spend money. For monetary policy, the central bank can C. Increase its money supply to lower the interest rate so that households can more easily make loans and companies can invest more. Countries can also potentially D. Increase exports to find international buyers. This is a popular and important policy solution. To summarize this presentation, please keep in mind that what is applicable in microeconomics does not necessarily translate to macroeconomics. The fallacy of composition demonstrates this. Furthermore, for the paradox of thrift, the government has economic tools to mitigate the negative effects. One such policy tool, especially for developing countries, is export-led growth. However, if all developing countries pursue export-led growth, this policy can backfire, so countries must be careful in how they address growth.